name is Jenna, and this is the most disturbing experience of my life. It all started when I matched with a guy named Mark on Tinder. His profile was impressive. He seemed smart, charming, and well-traveled. We chatted for a couple of weeks before he suggested we meet up for dinner. I was excited, but also a bit nervous, as you are with any first date. He seemed perfect. Too perfect, as it turned out. We decided to meet at a cozy little restaurant downtown. When I arrived, Mark was already there, looking exactly like his pictures. He stood up to greet me with a warm smile, and my nerves settled a bit. We had a great dinner, talking about our lives, dreams, and even a bit about our past relationships. He was attentive, asking questions, and genuinely seeming interested in everything I had to say. After dinner, he suggested we go for a walk in a nearby park. It was a warm summer evening, so I agreed, thinking it would be a nice way to end the night. As we walked, the conversation continued to flow effortlessly. But as the park grew darker, I started to feel a bit uneasy. Mark seemed to be taking us deeper into the park, away from the main paths. I casually mentioned that it was getting late and I should probably head home. He insisted we keep walking for a bit longer, saying he knew a beautiful spot by the lake. Reluctantly, I agreed, not wanting to seem rude or overly cautious. When we reached the lake, it was eerily quiet. The moonlight reflected off the still water, and for a moment I was mesmerized by the beauty. But then, Mark suddenly became very serious and started talking about how he believed in fate and that we were meant to be together. His intensity scared me, and I tried to lighten the mood by joking about how our Tinder match was definitely not written in the stars. That's when he grabbed my wrist tightly and said, "You don't understand, Jenna. I've been watching you for months." My heart raced as I realized this wasn't a joke. I tried to pull away, but his grip tightened. Panic set in. I started to scream, but he clamped his hand over my mouth and dragged me further into the shadows. My mind was racing, trying to figure out how I could escape. I fought with everything I had. I bit his hand, kicked and thrashed around until I managed to break free for a moment. I ran as fast as I could, not looking back. I could hear him cursing and running after me, but I kept going. My phone was in my purse, and I couldn't stop to get it. I just ran towards the lights of the park entrance, hoping someone would be there. Thankfully, a couple was walking their dog, and I screamed for help. They called the police and stayed with me until they arrived. Mark disappeared into the darkness. The police took my statement and launched a search for him, but he was never found. I later discovered that he had used a fake name and photos on his profile. The whole experience left me traumatized, and I haven't been able to use any dating apps since. For weeks after the incident, I was jumpy and couldn't sleep properly. Every little noise outside my window would send me into a panic. I ended up moving to a different apartment, hoping a change of scenery would help me feel safer. My friends and family were supportive, but they couldn't fully understand the fear that had taken root inside me. I started going to therapy to deal with the trauma. My therapist helped me work through my fears and taught me strategies to cope with anxiety. It was a slow process, but over time, I began to regain some sense of normalcy. I learned to be more cautious and trust my instincts. If something didn't feel right, I would listen to that inner voice. Months went by, and I started to rebuild my life. I focused on my hobbies, reconnected with friends, and even took up a self-defense class. The experience had changed me, but I was determined not to let it define me. I wanted to take back control of my life and not live in constant fear. One day I received a call from the police. They had found Mark, or rather, they had found out who he really was. His real name was Michael, and he had a history of stalking and violence against women. He had been on the run, but they finally caught him in another state. Knowing he was behind bars brought a sense of relief, but it didn't erase the trauma of what happened. I still have nightmares sometimes, but I've learned to cope with them. I know now that it's okay to be cautious and to prioritize my safety. The experience taught me valuable lessons about trust and intuition. While I may never fully recover from what happened, I'm stronger and more resilient because of it. I've since found love again, with someone who understands my past and supports me unconditionally. We met through mutual friends, not online, and he has been a source of comfort and strength. I've come to realize that while there are dangers in the world, there are also good people who can help you heal and move forward. My name is Eric, and I want to share a horrifying experience that I had through Tinder. I matched with a girl named Lisa. She She was beautiful, funny, and seemed genuinely interested in me. After a few days of chatting, we decided to meet for a drink at a popular bar in the city. Little did I know, this night would turn into a nightmare that would haunt me forever. When I arrived, Lisa was already there, looking even more stunning in person. We hit it off immediately. The drinks flowed, and so did the conversation. She was engaging, and I found myself quickly comfortable in her presence. After a few hours, Lisa suggested we go back to her place. I was thrilled, as we were getting along great. We took a cab to her apartment, and everything seemed perfect. Her apartment was stylish and clean, and we continued to chat and laugh as she poured us another drink. I felt a slight buzz, but nothing too intense. That's when things took a dark turn. I started to feel dizzy and disoriented. My vision blurred, and I could barely keep my eyes open. The last thing I remember was Lisa's face, looking almost sinister, as she said, "Don't worry, Eric, just relax." I woke up hours later, tied to a chair in a dark, damp basement. My head was pounding, and I felt a wave of panic wash over me. I could hear faint voices and footsteps above me. I struggled against the ropes, but they were too tight. The basement door creaked open, and Lisa walked in, followed by two men I didn't recognize. My heart sank as the reality of my situation set in. Lisa's entire demeanor had changed. She was cold and distant. She introduced the men as her partners and told me they were going to teach me a lesson. I had no idea what she meant until they started asking for my bank details, passwords, and anything of value. When I refused, one of the men punched me in the stomach, knocking the wind out of me. For hours, they tortured me, trying to get me to give up my information. I was terrified, in pain, and felt completely helpless. Eventually, they got what they wanted. They drained my bank accounts, took my phone, and left me tied up in that basement. I thought I was going to die there. The fear and pain were overwhelming, and I began to lose hope. But luck was on my side. I managed to loosen the ropes just enough to free one hand and eventually untied myself. I stumbled out of the basement and found myself in an unfamiliar neighborhood. I flagged down a passing car, and the driver called the police. I was taken to the hospital and treated for my injuries. The relief I felt was immense, but I knew my ordeal wasn't over. The police investigated, but Lisa and her accomplices had vanished. They had used fake names and rented the apartment with stolen IDs. It took months for me to recover physically, and even longer emotionally. The whole experience left me scarred, and I'm still wary of meeting people online. I had trusted someone I barely knew, and it nearly cost me my life. In the weeks following the incident, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every creak in my apartment made me jump, and I had trouble sleeping. I started seeing a therapist to deal with the trauma. Talking about what happened helped, but it was a long road to recovery. I learned to be more cautious and aware of my surroundings. My friends and family were incredibly supportive during this time. They checked in on me regularly and helped me with the things I couldn't do while recovering. Slowly, I began to rebuild my life. I changed my routines, took up new hobbies, and focused on things that made me happy. But the scars of that night were always there, lurking in the back of my mind. Months later, I received a call from the police. They had found one of Lisa's accomplices. He had been caught trying to pull the same scam on another victim. He gave up Lisa's real identity in exchange for a plea deal. She was eventually caught and brought to justice. Knowing she was behind bars brought some closure, but it didn't erase the trauma. I still struggle with trust issues and find it hard to connect with people. The experience changed me, made me more guarded and wary, but I refuse to let it define me. I've learned to be more cautious and to trust my instincts. If something feels off, I listen to that inner voice. It's better to be safe than sorry. I've since met someone special, not through a dating app, but through mutual friends. He understands my past and supports me unconditionally. He's patient and kind, and he's helped me rebuild my confidence. I've come to realize that while there are dangers in the world, there are also good people who can help you heal and move forward. Every day is a step towards healing. I'm stronger now, more resilient, and more aware of the world around me. I've taken self-defense classes and learned to protect myself. The experience taught me valuable lessons about trust, intuition, and the importance of being vigilant. While the scars may never fully fade, I'm determined to live my life to the fullest and not let fear control me. My name is Maria, and what happened to me on Tinder still haunts me to this day. I matched with a guy named David who seemed like the perfect gentleman. We talked for a few weeks before deciding to meet up. He suggested we go to a concert, which sounded like a lot of fun. I was excited, looking forward to a night of music and getting to know him better. The night of the concert, David picked me up from my apartment. He was charming and sweet, and we had a great time at the concert. The music was fantastic, and we danced and laughed throughout the night. Afterward, he suggested we grab a late-night coffee. We found a cozy little cafe that was still open and continued our conversation there. As the night went on, I started to feel a bit uneasy. David kept steering the conversation towards dark and disturbing topics like his fascination with true crime and his belief in the supernatural. I tried to steer the conversation back to lighter topics, but he was insistent. There was something unsettling about the way he spoke, but I couldn't put my finger on it. After coffee, he offered to drive me home. I agreed, feeling a bit uncomfortable but not wanting to make a scene. On the way, he suddenly took a detour into a secluded area. I asked him where we were going, and he said he wanted to show me something cool. My heart raced as he drove deeper into the woods. I started to regret not insisting on going straight home. He parked the car near an abandoned house and asked me to come with him. I refused, but he grabbed my arm and pulled me out of the car. I was terrified and started to scream, but he covered my mouth and dragged me towards the house. He kept saying, "You'll understand soon, Maria." The fear was overwhelming, and I felt completely helpless. Inside, the house was dark and filled with strange symbols and candles. It looked like something out of a horror movie. David pushed me into a room and locked the door behind me. I was trapped, and my phone had no signal. I banged on the door and screamed, but no one came. The silence was deafening, and I felt like I was in a nightmare. Hours passed, and I was beginning to lose hope when I heard footsteps outside the door. David came in holding a knife. He started chanting in a language I didn't understand and approached me slowly. I thought I was going to die. In a desperate attempt to save myself, I lunged at him and managed to knock the knife out of his hand. We struggled, but I was able to get away and run out of the house. I ran through the woods, not stopping until I found a road. A passing driver saw me and called the police. They arrived and took me to safety. David was arrested, and it turned out he had a history of mental illness and had been obsessed with occult practices. The whole experience was like a nightmare, and it took me a long time to feel safe again. In the days following the incident, I was in a constant state of fear. I couldn't sleep, and every noise made me jump. I moved in with a friend for a while, too scared to stay alone. The police investigation revealed that David had been stalking me for months before we met. He had created a fake profile to lure me in. The realization made my skin crawl. Therapy became a crucial part of my recovery. My therapist helped me process the trauma and taught me techniques to manage my anxiety. It was a long and painful process, but slowly I began to heal. I learned to be more cautious and trust my instincts. If something felt off, I wouldn't ignore it. Despite the fear, I refused to let the experience control my life. I took self-defense classes and started carrying pepper spray. My friends and family were incredibly supportive, and they helped me regain my confidence. I also joined a support group for survivors of stalking, where I found comfort in knowing I wasn't alone. Months later, I decided to move to a new city. I needed a fresh start, away from the memories of that night. The move was challenging, but it was also liberating. I found a new job, made new friends, and started to rebuild my life. The nightmares still came occasionally, but I was stronger now, more resilient. David was sentenced to prison, and knowing he was behind bars brought some closure. But the scars of that night would always be with me. I learned valuable lessons about trust and intuition. I became more aware of my surroundings and more cautious about who I let into my life. The experience had changed me, but it hadn't broken me. I eventually met someone special, through friends rather than online. He understood my past and supported me unconditionally. He was patient and kind, and he helped me rebuild my confidence. We took things slow, and he respected my need for space and safety. With his support, I began to find joy in life again. Every day is a step towards healing. I'm more vigilant and aware, but I refuse to live in constant fear. The experience taught me to trust my instincts and prioritize my safety. I've learned to find strength in my vulnerability and to seek help when I need it. While the memories of that night may never fully fade, I'm determined to live my life to the fullest. I've found a new sense of purpose in helping others who have gone through similar experiences. I volunteer at a local support group, sharing my story and offering support to those who need it. It's a way to turn my pain into something positive, to help others find their strength and resilience. And through it all, I've learned that while we may face unimaginable horrors, we also have the power to overcome them and find hope again.